Hey, Steve.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, folks.
Hey.
Welcome, welcome. So glad y'all are here. My name is Bethany Saltman. I am the Chief Creative Officer at Terawatt, and welcome. We are very excited to have you all here. So before I do a more formal introduction, why don't you take a moment and say your name, where you are calling in from in the chat, and tell us your favorite Thanksgiving dish. Actually, I need to start.
Well,
Bethany.
we know you have a favorite.
Awesome. It's gonna be really hard for me to concentrate as I see these coming in because I am
Mm.
so excited for Thanksgiving dinner.
What are you planning on cooking?
Oh my gosh, well, I do everything, the whole Megillah for a huge group of people. And so yeah, my favorite is the stuffing. But I do all the classics.
Yummy.
I'm
Yeah.
not cooking at all this year. We are actually going somewhere for the first time. And we're not going to cook. It's going to be interesting.
Nice.
Oh,
Very nice.
Colorado Springs.
So yeah, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see you all here. And as you know, Terawatt, we are a group coaching platform, and we love to create connections between people in learning and development and our excellent coaches for group coaching experiences. So that's what we do, and we are big fans of professional development. And so we like to offer professional development for people in the learning and development space, human resources, folks who are working in this very challenging time of businesses. So this is one of our quarterly roundtables led by Erica Keswin, who is a two-time, I was about to say three times because it's about to be three times, I bet, Wall Street Journal bestseller. She has written extensively. She on the human workplace. She writes for the Harvard Business Review quite often, and she is a workplace strategist. She works for many iconic companies throughout the world, does keynotes, and we are very fortunate to have her here with us at Terawatt, running these quarterly roundtables where she brings together really great groups of people to talk about important issues at work. So today is one of those days, and we love to hear from you all. So please feel invited to respond, to ask questions, to really interact. We love to explore these topics, partly because we have these amazing experts, but also because you all are experts as well. So please jump on in. And with that, I will turn it over to Erica.
Great. All right. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. And I know there's a couple other people that said they're coming, so we'll let them sort of trickle in. But today we're gonna talk about, I don't know, I'm thinking a lot about the year end. And we've kind of gone from this great resignation and quiet quitting to layoffs, and there's something called the pandemic flux syndrome, where people have taken one step forward and three steps back, and it's just a really interesting time to come together as people leaders to get a sense of what's on everybody's mind, and also hear from these three amazing panelists that we have that come at these issues from a variety of different ways. So what I'm going to do is, I could read their bios, but that's boring. So I am going to have them take a minute to introduce themselves. And we were talking before we got on with you all live, is that, and maybe we'll end up having a discussion about in-person versus remote, but I actually met all three of these amazing women over the last year in person at a conference. So just sort of put that in the back of your head to think as we go into 2023. So with that, Ella, I met you most recently. Why don't you take a minute? And Ella has a brand new, amazing book that came out about 10 days ago that we'll put in the chat. And we will, Ella, take it away. Tell us who you are.
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here. My name is Dr. Ella Washington, and I am an organizational psychologist whose career has been focused on creating more inclusive and equitable workplaces. I do that through my consulting business, Elevate Solutions, which is a DEI strategy firm, as well as through my educational practice as a professor at Georgetown McDonough School of Business. And there I teach our MBAs as well as our undergrad students on issues of leadership, human capital, and of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So so grateful for Erica and all having me here today. And yes, very excited about my recent book, The Necessary Journey, Making Real Progress on Equity and Inclusion.
All right, sounds great. Charlie, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Safro. I'm the founder and president of a firm called CS Recruiting. We're a third-party recruiting firm. I started the business in 2010 as a one-woman show. Today, we have about 45 employees. So very big on culture for our own team, but also using some of our strategies and tactics to really educate our client audience and hope for better leaders in the future.
Sounds great. And last but not least, Judith.
Hi, thank you, Erica. I'm so glad to be here and meet everyone. I'm Judith Harrison. I lead global diversity, equity, and inclusion for Weber Shadwick, which is a leading communications firm. I've been here for 16 years or so, and for me, DEI is just the essence of creating a corporate culture. To me, there is absolutely nothing more important than making sure that we have not only a diverse workforce, but an inclusive culture where every single person can feel a sense of belonging, and that they can be authentic as well. And my entire sort of career and life in the last 15 or so years has really been about helping to open doors and create opportunities for women and people of color and other underrepresented groups. So the whole idea for me is leveling the playing field wherever I am.
Right, great. Well, thank you. And again, if anybody has a question as we go on, feel free to put the little hand raise and make it as interactive as we can. I've been known to call on people. So, and I actually don't know a lot of people in today's group, so that might be kind of fun. First of all, again, thank you all for being here. This is the month of gratitude and we think about Thanksgiving. I want to read a study that I came across out of the University of Birmingham that found just the list of potential benefits of gratitude is almost endless. So when we say thank you, this is what happens in our world: raised self-confidence, better work attitudes, strengthened resiliency, even less physical pain, impact on health and wellness, and longevity. And I think what's interesting about that, when we think about saying thank you at work, we're thinking about this from an ROI business perspective. This is the end of the year. But I think in this year in particular, when we are dealing with so many issues around stress and mental health and burnout, I wanted to open with this study because I think we can think about this from both perspectives as we think about this year-end time with our employees, or Ella, in your case, your students in your classes. So Charlie, I'd love to start with you. I mean, how are you thinking about feedback and saying thank you and gratitude in this, pretty tumultuous year?
We do a lot of it. I am proud to say that our team has worked very hard to make it part of our business practice on a daily basis. So, so many different things. Our leadership team, we do one-on-ones with everyone in the company 4 times a year. So really getting a chance to interact with them. And the purpose of those meetings is to show our appreciation and recognition, but also to get to know who they are behind their title. That is so important, to see every employee as a human beyond just what they do. We also empower our team to recognize each other. So we have a formal employee recognition system that has some different processes where if you see something, say something. If somebody goes out of their way and does even the smallest thing, it could be a shout out on Slack. It could be public recognition on LinkedIn. It could be an announcement in an all company meeting. We also, as part of our process, really encourage our team to share notes with our HR group that will then trigger the HR group to send a little gift to each team member. So we try and take a lot of surveys, document what we learn in conversations. I could tell you what every person on my team's favorite candy is. I could tell you if they drink wine or beer or neither, because when those opportunities come up, it's amazing what, you know, a delivery of a box of Raisinets can do for someone just to say thank you, and such a minimal spend from an employer standpoint. So we have a budget set aside, and that is a budget that we are determined to use every year and make sure that everyone is feeling that gratitude, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up and also peer to peer.
Well, and I agree that these little things can go a long way, especially if they're personal. I was going to say Raisinets, that's actually my husband's favorite candy. So, you know, figuring out why one person likes one thing over the other. So, so that's great. Ella, how do you think about, and again, as you guys answer these questions, it could be how you think about them at work, in life, at home, really, you know, 'tis the season. So, what are you thinking, Ella?
Yes. So, you know, from the DEI lens, I'm always thinking about how do we make feedback helpful and equitable at the same time. We know that women and people of color tend to get less candid feedback than other groups, especially in larger organizational settings. And it's not just about being nice. You know, we often think of not saying that hard thing as being because we don't want to be mean, but truly feedback is kind and it is a gift, as this session is called. And it's important because there are so many studies. There was one in the New York Times just last year on what happens, for example, when women don't get the candid feedback the same as their male counterparts. And over the course of a 15-year career at one organization, they physically plotted out how the differences in elevation and development and career mobility were because of lack of candid feedback. For two people that started at the exact same time. And so when I'm thinking about feedback, I am always checking to make sure that my processes that I'm putting in place are, one, sustainable for me, right? Because oftentimes people, you know, regret or avoid having to sit down and do feedback for all of their team members because it takes so long. It's so laborious. And part of it is that that's just the name of the game, but there are also other ways you can put systems in place to make it more sustainable for you and less of a burden, because you don't want the feedback you're giving to feel like it's a burden. You want it to be a great leadership exercise for yourself and a great development exercise for your team.
Right. That sounds, it's not rocket science, but it's not easy. Also, I mean, I think when at the end, we'll talk about managers, who I know these days feel like they're more overwhelmed than ever and really don't oftentimes have the tools to give feedback. Just one, you know, Ellie, you mentioned the women. I mean, what can a woman, like, what would you advise someone to do? What would you advise me to do if I felt like my male counterparts were getting tons of feedback and I wasn't? You know, what can someone do from a bottom up perspective?
Yeah, so and the good thing about this advice is that it can apply to everyone. But in that specific situation, I would encourage you to not only just ask for general feedback, but get really granular in the type of questions that you're asking. Oftentimes we get feedback that, oh, that was a great job, or, you know, I'd love to see you lean in a little bit more. What do those words actually mean, right? You know, what was great, or what does it mean to lean in more? What exactly would have led to better performance from your perspective? So being really specific in the follow-up questions you're asking about feedback. If someone says that was a great job, wonderful. What specific behaviors were great? What are the specific things that you noticed in that work so that I can replicate them? The other thing I would encourage is to make sure that your questions and asking for feedback is connected to performance outcomes that your team cares about. And the reason why that's important is because research has shown us, unfortunately, many times that women especially often get feedback based on their personalities and whether or not they are a communal, you know, team player, versus those bottom line results that maybe their male counterparts are getting feedback on. a study done last year, published in Harvard Business Review by Joan Williams and teams, outlined, the difference in the type of feedback that was given in a particular law firm to women and people of color, and much more personality-based feedback for the women, for example. And so you just want to kind of watch that. So even when you are getting the feedback, making sure that you're getting feedback that is tangible, actionable, but also related to the outcomes that are important.
Yep. All right. Thank you. So Judith, I want to shift gears. Feedback isn't just what happens during a performance review. And I think a piece of it, when we think about especially what's gone on over the last couple of years, it's important for people to come together and in the roles that you all are in, to really take the pulse on the organization as a whole in terms of how they're doing and getting that kind of feedback. So going in a bit of a different direction, Judith, you have a program. And again, we were saying before you all jumped on, I heard Judith speak at a conference called From Day One and kind of stopped her at the end because she talked about this program that just blew me away. And I'm excited for her to share. It's called Time to Connect. And she helps provide a platform for people to come together during these challenging times. So Judith, I would love for you to share with everybody, tell us about the program and the purpose behind it. But what I would also love for you to share is how you tee it up. Maybe you can give an example of one of the ones you had very recently, and the letter that you write, and it's become a ritual, which, as you all know, I love rituals. So I'm sure I'll have some follow-up questions, but this is a different way to really get feedback on a team, a department, or an organization as a whole.
Thank you so much for teeing that up, Erica. Time to Connect is a series of Teams calls or Zoom calls for hundreds of our people to get together, sometimes more than that. They started out really right after the death of George Floyd, because I felt it was so important to give people a chance to process everything that had happened and to open up a dialogue about race, which is in many organizations, it's like the third rail. We're not going to talk about this stuff from a societal perspective. But we had, right after George Floyd, I actually did 21 town halls in North America in 1 week to get all of this feedback from people. And what I kept hearing was this level of emotion about not only how his death had affected them, but all of these experiences and ideas that they'd had about race and ethnicity going way back that finally needed to come out and they could have a real conversation. So I thought, okay, we'll have a series of conversations for a couple of months just to get everything sort of out in the open and have people feel better. And then it seemed like events started to happen every month. There was something new to talk about. So it could be anti-Asian violence. It could be misogyny. It could be their intersection, which happens a lot. We had one, not in North America, but EMEA, about the intersection of misogyny and violence, because you may recall there was a series of protests in the UK in 2021 when this young woman who was walking home, minding her own business, was grabbed and murdered by a policeman. She was our employee. So we had a Time to Connect discussion about that in EMEA, because that was just so gut-wrenching for our people there. So we did this all through 2021 with everything imaginable, with politics, political polarization, with everything, all sorts of racism and anti-Semitism as well. So I thought at the beginning of 2022, maybe we'll just cut it down to like once a quarter. Things kept happening. And so they're once a month or even more, depending on what's going on in the world. And what happens is that for each conversation, I frame it by just writing something about the event. What are we going to talk about? Why is it important? And framing each conversation with the idea that the purpose of the call is for us to support one another as we deal with all of these events that are happening in the world. Right. So it's not just support, it's about being able to have these conversations in basically a judgment-free zone. So I want to encourage everybody to really feel free to talk about how they're feeling, And the range of emotions and the range of experiences that I hear are mind-boggling. You know, things that I never, ever thought I would hear in a corporate environment. But what is really incredibly rewarding and beautiful about it is that people not only talk about themselves and their own experiences, but they express so much support for one another. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. So you'll hear people on the calls saying, well, if you need to talk, you know, call me. You'll see it in the chat. They express sympathy, empathy, all kinds of things. And so most recently, we had two discussions on Monday about mental health, right? So normally we do North America, occasionally EMEA. Mental health is such a huge issue that it is well worth global discussion, and not just once. We're going to do this multiple times. So we had a fireside chat with two people, one of whom is known, his name is Thomas Duncan Bell. He's known as the bipolar businessman. And he is brilliant and really open about his experience and his journey. The other person comes to it from a different perspective. He is the founder of Project Healthy Minds, which is an organization that we are working with to develop a global mental health strategy that will enable our leaders to really figure out what's going on with our folks and support them. So we did a fireside chat with them and then moved them off to the side. They got off the call so that we could then go into the normal Weber Shadwick only time to connect. The things we heard from all over the world were extraordinary. And people are stopping me in the hall every day to say, when can we do it again? Thank you so much. When can we do it again? It was such a relief to be able to share the impacts that mental health issues have, not only on them as individuals with their own issues, but their families. People live with and love people who have mental health issues. And, you know, people were very open about the fact that that can rip your heart out. And they were so grateful for the forum and so supportive of one another. We would bring tears to anybody's eyes. And a lot of people cried because that's what happens on these calls. But I'm so thrilled that we can do this. And it's a great way of finding out how our people are doing, because they really do tell us. And then they write to me afterwards. And so it's a great pulse check for all of us.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Judith. I mean, I wanted you to, I mean, to me, every time I hear it, it's an amazing, again, I don't know if somebody might have their sound on in the background, but no worries, maybe just check. But it's an amazing example of, again, not rocket science, but you're taking what's going on in the world. And what Judith does is she writes a letter that kind of articulates the issue, points people to resources and things if her company is actually provide either resources to learn more or even things that they're doing to support a particular cause. And then what is the line, Judith? You end each of the letters before you open up the conversation with, what do you say? Like, how are you doing?
With that, how are you doing? And
Right.
then usually dead silence, after which I have to open up to talk about how I feel about whatever the topic of the day is, because then that modeling gives people the freedom and the confidence to come forward. So that's when the conversation starts. It never starts, except with the Dobbs decision, never starts with just people opening up. It's always them waiting for me to say something.
Right. And I get this question a lot, even at, I was at an event yesterday at this Forbes Future of Work Summit. And the issue is always around, how do I know what issues to speak out about through the lens of my company? You know, and if you pick every issue, you know, which ones you support, which ones you not support. I often say, you know, go to your company values and because you can't really be on the pulpit talking about every single one in terms of, you know, having an opinion. But I think what you've done is you're just bringing people together for support, to have challenging conversations. And the gratitude piece for me is when you tried to, you know, cut it down a little bit, you heard the impact that it had.
Incredible. Yeah.
So by show of hands, does anybody have anything in their organization where they bring people together, you know, to sort of take the pulse to talk about some of these more challenging issues? Yeah, a couple. I saw more companies doing it, especially after Roe v. Wade, because it was something that all of a
Mhm.
sudden, regardless of which side you were on, they felt that there was this need that we had to say something. So thank you for that. And we have a little note in the chat with the link to the article that I wrote about Judith and this program. So again, feel free during the Q&A to ask more about it. But it's just very, very cool. All right. So I want to shift a little bit. One of my other sort of obsessions these days is about managers. And you'll all see it soon, but work in another article about the managers are having a moment. And I think they really are having a moment. Managers have had to manage over the last couple of years during the most stressful time that we've seen. They don't have the resources, they don't have the training. Elle, as you were saying, like they don't have a lot of these skills to give feedback. Not everybody, Charlie has a CEO, like you, that's so thoughtful about this stuff. Most people don't. And so I see them sort of imploding at the moment. And so this is an opportunity year end. So I guess, Charlie, I'll go back to you. They're stuck in the middle. How are you thinking, or what are you doing right now to support these managers, which I really believe are our most valuable employees right now, because they're on the front lines dealing with all your new hires. They're, the senior leaders, we need the senior leaders, but it's these managers that are really, fighting it sort of at both ends, and we don't want to lose them.
Yeah, I mean, we have an interesting evolution because we're a small organization. Even today, 45 people. When we started around maybe 2012, 2 years in, we had 6 people. And then the next year, 9, 12. So we were very flat for a while. And what happened was, as our tenure increased and our retention increased, we knew that we had to develop some of our high performers or more ambitious employees for retention purposes. We wanted them to stay and they wanted to move up in their careers. So really proud that today we've got multiple different layers in our organization. And we've probably had like true managers in place for about 4 years. But one of the things we've done this year is we've started to pull our managers up into portions of our leadership meetings. So yes, we give them notes and we recap and summarize what we talked about, but we set aside about 2 hours. We have a 4-person leadership team. Every quarter, we have an 8-hour offsite, and then we pull our managers in for 2 hours and really create an agenda that can drive conversation with them. We also expose our managers to our employee engagement survey results, which we've kept to ourselves as a leadership team for the last 3 years, because quite honestly, those results are really hard to stomach. I actually had a meeting this morning where we went over our results from the last quarter, and I take it personally, and I know our managers take it personally too. It's anonymous, but that's a whole other conversation. The minute you allow employees to provide anonymous feedback, that's really when the true colors come out. So we've started to, we protect our managers. They don't need to be burdened with some of our legal decisions or financial decisions or things that aren't going to impact them immediately, but we do empower them and bring them into these conversations and with conversations. So we'll say to them, you have not been part of these survey result calls yet, but the reason we're pulling you in is because we want you to see how the team responds. We want you to see where we are going to focus on improving over this next quarter. And then lastly, we developed a learning and development program about a year ago. It was something we always wanted. We didn't have a budget for it. So we were scrappy and we kind of made it up with our own resources. So our L&D program consists of TED Talks, podcasts, books, articles, free webinars, some paid webinars, but really put that focus on our managers. And they went through our L&D program. They're now on their year 2, customizing every course they take based on what they're interested in, where we think they can continue to excel, and then where we see opportunities for improvement. So a very customized L&D program that I don't want to say it wasn't a lot of work. It was a lot of work to design the program, but now it's a well-oiled machine and we can execute and provide these course suggestions very quickly. And and they're, again, like TED Talks, those are not a burden, like, and we want them to do it during business hours. So helping provide them with the tools to manage and provide feedback the right way.
Yeah, it's great. So a couple of things that jump out that I also see in my work as best practices, for sure, with the learning and development programs, they need to do them during business hours. If you value it, then put your money where your mouth is. And this isn't a do it at 5 o'clock. Like that is not going to work. So I love that. The second thing that jumped out at me was, saying to the managers, we see you, to me, your message was, we see you as future leaders and we want you to help be part of the solution. So we're going to share this, what was once confidential data around the employee engagement survey. And so we're going to bring you in, to the inner circle to help, come up with creative solutions. So again, a lot of times, when we decided to do this webinar today and we're thinking about year end, it is a time when a lot of people, they think about, I'm going to get my bonus and I'm going to leave. Maybe less so now with thinking about layoffs, but there tends to be a lot of turnover after the first of the year. And one of the things that I've seen is that learning and development is one of the most critical things for retention. And so as we think about, giving these managers these opportunities, I think you're really on the right track. It's great.
One other thing I'll add real quick is that this was not intended, but it has created a lot of empathy for our leadership team. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that result where now our managers will look at us and they're like, wow, like I didn't realize what you carried. I didn't realize the stressors that you have from our employee feedback or from these situations. So not to martyr ourselves, but it's been very, very organic that now they really understand what it means to be a leader and they feel the right amount of pressure. I think that's important.
I love that. And that we've seen a lot of that during the pandemic, where in the beginning, leaders, this whole idea of bringing your human to work, where leaders had to be more human because they didn't have a choice. They had kids and dogs and so many things going on. And as I often say, we don't want to go back to March of 2020, but we also don't want to forget some of what we saw and how we felt. And so this gives them, I love that, a lens into, it's not all roses here on the leader. You might think it's, perfect. And maybe I'm, zooming in from my vacation home, but you know what? I also carry a lot. So, and Bethany just wrote the right amount of pressure. So I love that. Ella, how do you think about managers, in general, or is there, and you and Judith are both in the DE&I space, thinking about it through that lens as well?
So yeah, I was taking notes on my end, and I think I heard tools, time, and I would add a third T, transparency. And what I think is missing with managers, especially at the middle level management, is transparency on their expectations for driving culture. And that might sound counterintuitive, but what happens is managers are told what they're responsible for in terms of bottom lines, in terms of end of year goals. And it always seems like those cultural or DEI elements are icing on the cake. When they have time, they should do one-on-ones, or as they hit their metrics, they're able to create spaces for dialogue and connection. And what I like to see is a shift in that level of transparency and even expectation that managers are the cultural drivers. And I think that is really true when it comes to any DEI strategy as well. DEI strategies are most effective when middle managers see themselves as a strong catalyst of them, because the messaging comes from the top of the organization, what we're trying to accomplish and why, and the broad way that we want to do that. And then from a grassroots perspective, you have employees that are able to give feedback on, are these shifts and changes or implementations of DEI strategies effective or not, right? And so the middle level manager is the one who gets that feedback loop from the team members, but also takes it from the top of the organization down. And so when you are thinking about the middle level manager, they really are a critical piece of the culture. But if they're so overworked and overwhelmed, and they always think about these cultural elements as nice to have or to do when their to-do list is finished, they almost never get done. And they certainly don't get done in a thoughtful and effective way. And so I'd like to see an increase in that transparency of, the expectation for managers on the people side as part of their business results, not as an extra thing to do when everything else is finished.
Yep. It's one of the reasons why managers are so burned out, because it's like you become a manager, but you still have this whole list of things to do in your day job. So it's like Charlie's saying, do the learning and development during the day, and let's have the manager say, yeah, this counts as part of your actual work and we value it, and we're actually going to evaluate you on it. So I love that. Judith, anything to add on your front?
Oh, yeah, I think that everything Ella said was so important. Some things that really strike me, and Charlie as well. Some things that strike me are about the need for transparency in terms of expectations, and clarity in terms of expectations, and making sure that our middle managers, who are really, as you said, the keepers of the culture and the reason that people either stay or leave the organization, because that's where their daily interactions are. It's not with the leadership, it's with their immediate manager. That they understand how important their way of being is and their management style is to the overall health of the organization. So yes, it's about them as individuals. If they're bonus eligible, then obviously their bonus will come into this as well. But I think that people have to be held accountable in different ways. So I'll give you an example. We have at Weber Shadwick what we call a talent compass, which really it's a wonderful way of looking at and explaining what goes into being successful at this organization. So it's not job descriptions, it's really about the elements that go into being a great manager. So for us, we have specific inclusive behavioral expectations at every level. So, and they're bolded, in the talent compass. And the idea is to make sure people understand that DEI is not sort of off to the side, something they can do like when they have a minute, when the moon is full or whatever, but it is every day. It's their responsibility every single day. And we also, to Charlie's point, had from our parent company, global climate for inclusion surveys, which really had people anonymously talking about their experience of inclusion. And that goes to how they were managed, how they feel in terms of equal opportunity and so on. And you could slice and dice the results by demographics. And we shared those results with our senior leaders, but then we gave the senior leaders a template to then sort of condense the results and share with managers, because it's important for the managers to know what their people in each office are saying. And so making sure that there's always a way to have those cultural touch points is critical. And to me, those are the major things. Oh, and in terms of inclusive management, we also want people to understand that inclusive management is not something that you just do for certain groups of people. If you learn to manage inclusively, that makes you a great manager. So what we are piloting right now with this great consulting company is this Managers Toolkit, Inclusive Managers Toolkit. And it's a 10-week course. It's not like you sit here for a half hour, you learned a few things, and it's like, aha, I'm done. No, it's 10 weeks of content, of videos, of facilitated discussions, of homework with a cohort. And what we're hearing in terms of results, we're almost through the 10 weeks, people love it. They are learning so much about how to manage and what's important. And it makes their jobs easier. It gives them confidence. It gives them tools that they didn't have before. So my plan for 2023 is to really expand this, to Weberize the course, as we would call it, which is to make it very specific to us, and to put probably 100 of our people through it if we can. So that is my dream. I don't know where we're going to be in terms of my ability to finance this, but my goal really is to have every single middle manager in this organization, at least within North America, take this course, because they, as we said, are basically the keepers of the culture. So that is super important.
Whoa, that is amazing. How what is the name of the course?
It's called the Inclusive Managers Toolkit, and the consulting firm, which I adore, is Dieta Jones and Associates. And they're just doing a spectacular job on
And
this.
how many people are in a cohort?
You can have as well, if you do it, by company, you can have 100, 200. We're piloting right now. So for the pilot, we have like 10 people in the public course, which people can sign up for, not through their company, but just themselves. But we wanted them to have it, to just look at this, see what it was like, and then be able to come back, hopefully, and advocate for this, be advocates for this training with their peers. And that is what is happening.
Wow.
So
But when you say the public course, these are for Weber Shandwick managers.
we're going to do this for Weber Shandwick managers. But what I mean is that there's a way for people to sign up for this course, not through their companies, but just as individuals,
Right,
and
right,
the off-the-shelf course.
right.
So
But you're
that's
going to
what
bring it.
And that's what our people are doing right now as a pilot. They
Got
love it, and then we're going to Weberize it so that it's really about us.
Well, look, I will be very curious. I'm a huge proponent of cohort-based learning and coaching. It's one of the reasons why I decided to partner with Terawatt. I mean, and you'll see in this, I'll send it to all of you, this new article that I'm working on about this idea of peer coaching, that people like to learn from each other. I mean, like we're doing here. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've been taking notes from what you're all saying. So it's really powerful. And I think it's even more important now when people aren't coming in the office as much to see each other. How are you building these cross-functional relationships and doing it at that middle level manager? So I had no idea you were even doing that. So I am really excited.
Thank you.
All right. So, one more thing.
Yes, and that is part of that cohort learning experience for us. This is a different one. We just started a BIPOC sponsorship program back in September, where we connected 13 very high potential, high value folks at the VP and above level with the most senior people in our organization, so that they can get not only that exposure to that senior level, but that the senior folks would then become advocates for them, not just mentors in the background, but get to know them as people and advocate for them to have the experiences they need in order to move to the next level. And what we're telling both sides, the proteges and the sponsors, that it's not just about getting to the next level. That's like any old mentoring program. This is giving them the opportunity to look at their careers in a sort of blue sky way. Like, what do you really want to do? What impact do you want to have on the world? How can I, as a sponsor, help you get there? It's awesome. So
I'm going to come back in my next working life and work at Weber Shandwick or work, Charlie, work for you. Because yeah, I mean, this is why I just love this. And, we record it so we can share it out with people that couldn't make it, because it's just amazing. All right. So I would love to hear, I want to get some questions from everybody going. I had one question that was sent to me directly that I'll quickly ask the panelists to give a quick answer, but then I would really love if some other people could answer it, because it's a different direction. But in this time of the year that we're in, COVID's kind of still around, costs, layoffs, gratitude, end of year. Should we have a holiday party? Yes, no, in person, remote. Oh, and then Stephen has a question. Great. So Charlie, yes or no, are you having a holiday party?
Yes, we are. And it is an invaluable ROI. I'll tell a real quick story that when we went virtual in 2020, but really formally made the decision in 2021, we took a fifth of our rent money that we were paying for our office space and put it towards a company retreat. So we're now planning our February retreat, year 2, going to Mexico, taking, 45 people to Mexico for 3 nights. We did it last year. A lot of people are like, why would you do that? Why would you, there's so many other ways to spend your money. The connections, the bonding, the friendships cannot be replaced. And I think that's what you get out of a holiday party too. Just the gratitude for each other, the cheer, the celebration for the end of the year. So it doesn't have to be a crazy budget or super upscale. People will appreciate getting together, a free meal, maybe a secret Santa or something to just lighten the mood. But my answer is yes, do it.
Okay. I don't know, Ella, it's a little different for you in your class. Not sure if you want to weigh in or pass.
It's very different in the academic space, but what I will tell you is many of my clients are having the same challenges. And, at the end of the day, it's not about a big spend for a holiday party. It's about building community and connection and acknowledging that we've gotten through another year, right? And we're excited about the future. So I encourage my clients to try to get creative with their holiday parties. But if you're going to do it, you want to do it in a way that is still authentic and enjoyable for your employees, because we all remember a few years ago when, many companies were scaling back their holiday parties, and it just felt like a shell, right? It didn't feel like we're really here to celebrate. So if we're not going to be able to do it in a way that's actually enjoyable, then thinking about some creative ways that aren't deemed as like the holiday party, but to still acknowledge the hard work of your team members and build community is what I would suggest.
Yeah, I always say, when you're at the fork in the road, the litmus test, holiday party, no holiday party. And again, whether it's online or virtual, hybrid, or in person, think it through the lens of your values, and your values should help you drive that decision. Judith, what are you guys doing over there to celebrate the holidays?
We have, I don't know, maybe 18 to 20 offices throughout North America. So there isn't like one holiday party. It is basically per city. And so it could be, if it's a small office, then yeah, great party, within the office. In New York, we used to rent spaces so that we could hold like 500 people. I doubt that's going to happen this year. So I think what will happen is that teams will celebrate individually. And so there'll be groups of people going out to dinner and figuring out things that they want to do, but definitely to celebrate.
Okay, and to say thank you. Okay, Stephen from Colorado Springs, what is your question?
Hi, everybody. This question is for Ella, but if the other panelists would like to respond, I'd be greatly appreciative of that. Ella, I have a tiny little podcast, and one of the guests that are queued up in the next couple of weeks is a fellow that I worked with when I was on the faculty at the Air Force Academy. And he's a highly successful, highly respected swim coach. And for the first 10 years of his career, he coached both the men's and women's teams, and then just focused on the women's team. And he's won over 300 dual meets and had a couple, I think he had back-to-back national championships. And I reached out to him after we ran into each other at a banquet, and so, asked him if you'd like to be part of the podcast and talk about basically how do you get women to perform at such a high level, particularly in a place that is extremely, there's nothing but pressure at the Air Force Academy. And to be quite honest with you, where women are not all that valued. Okay. But the women themselves are highly competitive and highly talented. And my goal for the podcast, Ella, is to get more men talking about this, because as I looked at the research, these were all DEI issues. Okay. So how, it's basically two guys talking about women, and that's usually not a good thing. But I think in this case is exactly what we want. I'm wondering if you have, any type of advice for me as the podcast host, how I can get more men to talk about these issues.
Yeah. First of all, it sounds like a fascinating guest to your podcast. So great job on that. And I'm sure he'll have a lot to share. Oftentimes we think of these challenges around, let's say, women and performance as an individual issue, meaning there's something that women are not doing to perform at the level of the men. What we don't take into account are the structural systems of bias and inequality that women have to deal with their entire lives. And so it's not always a matter of motivation or desire or, the coach doing something to kind of trick the women into performing at a higher level. you really have to acknowledge that, let's say, even in the larger Air Force, there are systems of inequality. And so women are getting these messages around inequality throughout their entire workplace experience. And so when they come to the pool, they can't just shed all that automatically, right? And so it's kind of like the notion, if we tell women or anyone else to lean in, that's great, but we also have to make sure the structures are leaning in as well. And as an individual coach, he may not be able to change all the structures, but understanding kind of the broader landscape, and this is not just, a women's performance or motivation issue, is a step in the right direction, a step to systematic change, as opposed to what do I need to say to motivate this one individual? We have to look at the larger context. And so I would ask him questions about understanding, the context of what his team members were dealing with even outside of the pool. Were there things about how he approached feedback? Were there things how he approached community building that were similar or different than what they experienced in the larger Air Force environment? Because that could be really interesting. But I'd love to hear Judith's perspective on this as well.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of looking at the systems around these swimmers, right? So it's not just them as individuals, it's what are they facing in order to even get to the point where they are considered for the team. Because the structures are not equal, the opportunities are not equal. And so you really have to look at the larger context. And I think it's great that you and this other person, the coach, are going to have this conversation. I do think, though, that it could be useful to bring in a woman athlete, because to me, that's the third part of the conversation. So there's what you two know, but then there's the woman who actually has the experience of being an elite athlete, which is going to be very different from that of a man. I used to work with a woman who was a competitive swimmer. And she used to tell stories about what it was like for her in that arena. I mean, competitive as in she was, I think, on a team that was trying out for the Olympics. I mean, it was that level of competition. And so her expectations and what she went through and the discipline that she had were phenomenal and just different. So I think it would be useful to sort of round out the podcast with that kind of voice.
Amazing. Stephen, did you have anything else?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay. I can follow up with you too. When I was thinking Colorado Springs, I was thinking the USOPC. So I'm pretty involved in the Olympic Foundation, and I launched a women's initiative. So I know a lot of these women athletes. So happy to try to find you a swimmer, an Olympic swimmer for your podcast if you want it. And maybe you could put the name of your podcast in the chat, and we can all listen in. So we are coming up on the hour, and again, this is Thanksgiving and the season of gratitude, and I'm just so thankful for this conversation, for all of you to be here. Would love for everybody to just put in, again, there's research that shows that when you write down in words what you're grateful for, there really is an amazing impact on health and wellness. And I just want to do a quick last round robin with our three panelists. Charlie, I'll start with you. What are you grateful for this year?
I'm grateful for my women leadership team. There's 4 of us. We are all women, and I could not do it alone. So I empower them every day, and they make me a better leader.
Sounds great. Judith, what about you? What are you grateful for?
Family and friends, and in family, I'm including my dog Layla, for whom I am incredibly grateful. Also to the Weber Shandler community that shares so much and trusts me with the incredible experiences that they have. And then last but not least, really the freedom to make a difference in this world in the way that I want to, through Weber Shandwick and through other associations like New York Women in Communications and the PRSA Foundation. So it's all about, promoting diversity in many different ways. So grateful for all of that.
All right. And Ella, last but not least, bring us home. What are you
Yes.
grateful for?
I am most grateful for health, moments of joy with my loved ones, and some upcoming rest. It's been a busy year. I know for many of us, we felt that way. And I really enjoy the time to unplug around the holidays, reconnect with myself, reconnect with my family and loved ones. So looking forward to that.
I love it. As I often say, and Steve, it's actually the name of my podcast, which is called Left to Our Own Devices. So left to our own devices, we're not connecting. Left to our own devices, we may not rest during the holidays. So with that, let's bring some of these intention to these holidays, give feedback, say thank you, and come back next year even stronger. So Terawatt, a big thank you for making these quarterly conversations happen. I can't believe, this is our fourth quarter of doing them. Feel free, everyone, to reach out. We'd love to get feedback from you, hear what you thought about the conversation today. Please stay in touch, and happy and healthy.
You too. Thanks so much, everyone.
So